The weight of command. An elderly man sits in a simple chair. The room is quiet. No music, no dramatic lighting. Just him, the camera, and silence. He is 93 years old. His posture is military straight. His hands rest on his knees. He looks directly into the lens. I don't usually talk about the war, not because I don't remember. I remember everything, too much probably. But most people who ask don't really want to know. They want stories about courage, brotherhood, the things you see in films, and I understand that. The war has been turned into something you can watch, something with a beginning, a middle, and an end. But that's not what I remember. What I remember is winter, mud, cold that went through every layer you wore, the smell of diesel fuel mixed with smoke, the sound of engines that never stopped, and decisions that had to be made in minutes, sometimes seconds, with incomplete information and no time to think. I was 26 years old, an officer in the U.S. Third Army. I served directly under General George S. Patton during the final push into Germany in early 1945. If you know anything about Patton, you know he didn't tolerate hesitation. Speed was everything. Aggression was doctrine. He believed that a good plan executed now was better than a perfect plan executed next week. And he was right. Tactically, strategically, he was right. We moved faster than the enemy could react. We cut supply lines. We encircled divisions. We ended the war sooner than it would have ended otherwise. But speed has a cost. It was February, maybe early March. I don't remember the exact date. We were deep into enemy territory, moving faster than our own supply lines could keep up. The weather was brutal. Roads turned to rivers of mud. Vehicles broke down. Men were exhausted. But we kept moving because those were the orders, and orders were all we had. One morning I was called to a briefing. Intelligence had come in overnight. There was a city ahead, maybe 15, 20 kilometers from our current position. Population 25,000. Civilians, women, children, elderly. It wasn't a military target. It was just a place where people lived. But the Germans were there. Not a large force, maybe 2 or 3 companies, but they were dug in and they were preparing demolitions. A dam upstream, ammunition depots inside the city, fuel storage facilities. If we attacked the city directly, if there was any kind of prolonged firefight, those charges would go off. The dam would flood half the valley. The depots would level entire neighborhoods. The city would be destroyed, and everyone in it would die. Intelligence estimated we had maybe 36 hours before the Germans either withdrew or blew everything themselves. 36 hours to decide what to do. There was an alternative. We could bypass the city, move fast, come around from the north, cut off the German retreat before they had time to react. If we moved at night, if we maintained radio silence, if everything went perfectly, we could take the city intact. No fighting in the streets, no demolitions. 25,000 people would live, but there was a problem. To move that fast, we needed to leave behind a covering force. Someone had to stay on the main road, keep the enemy's attention, make them think we were still preparing for a frontal assault, make them believe they still had time. 1 battalion, maybe 400 men, most of them 19, 20 years old, kids from Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, boys who'd been drafted, trained for a few months, shipped overseas and told to follow orders. They would have minimal artillery support, no air cover. The weather was too bad, no reinforcements. Once we started the maneuver, we couldn't turn back. They would be alone. The order came down from division. The plan was approved. All that remained was the final operational decision. Which battalion, which position, what time? That decision was mine. I want to be very clear about something. This was not a rogue operation. This was not me acting on my own. The plan came from higher up, division staff, maybe Corps, maybe Patton himself. I don't know. My job was not to question the strategy. My job was to execute it. That's what command is. You are part of a chain. Orders come down. You interpret them, you adapt them to the situation on the ground, and you pass them on. You are not asked to agree. You are not asked to feel good about it. You are asked to do your job, and I did my job. But someone still had to choose. Someone still had to look at a map, look at a roster, and say, this battalion, this location, this time. That someone was me. I knew the officers in that battalion. Not well, we'd only been together a few weeks, but I knew them. I'd had meals with them. I'd reviewed reports with them. I knew which one had just gotten married before shipping out. I knew which one kept a photograph of his younger brother in his pocket. I knew their men even less. A few faces, a few names. But I'd walked past them in the mornings. I'd seen them cleaning weapons, writing letters, playing cards in the mud. I'd heard them joke, I'd heard them complain, I'd heard them talk about home. They were soldiers. They understood what they'd signed up for. But understanding doesn't make it easier. The night before the maneuver, I went to the battalion commander, a lieutenant, 23 years old, good officer, calm under pressure. He knew what the assignment meant. I could see it in his face. I didn't lie to him. I didn't tell him everything would be fine. I told him what the mission was. Hold the road, draw the enemy's attention, buy us 12 hours. After that, he was authorized to withdraw if possible. He nodded. He asked a few tactical questions. Then he saluted and left. I never saw him again. The maneuver began at 200 hours. We moved in complete darkness, no headlights, no radio transmissions. The weather helped, low clouds, freezing rain. The enemy didn't see us. The battalion took up their position at dawn. By 0800 they were engaged. I could hear the artillery from miles away, distant, constant, like thunder that wouldn't stop. We kept moving. By 1400 hours, we'd completed the encirclement. The German forces were cut off. They had no choice but to surrender or die. Most of them surrendered. The city was taken without a fight. The demolitions were disarmed. The dam was secured. 25,000 people woke up the next morning in their own beds, in their own homes, alive. The battalion held their position until they ran out of ammunition. Then they were overrun. 400 men, gone. After the war, I was decorated. I received commendations for tactical leadership. People shook my hand. They called me a hero. They said I'd saved an entire city, and I had. That's the part that makes it unbearable. If I'd made the wrong decision, if I'd refused the order, if I'd delayed, if I'd tried to find another way, those 25,000 people would be dead. There is no version of that day where everyone lives. The only question was, who dies? I chose. I signed the order. The civilians lived. The soldiers died. By any rational measure, I made the correct decision. And I have lived with that decision every day since. People think guilt is about doing something wrong. It isn't. Guilt is about responsibility. It's about being the person who decided. It doesn't matter if the decision was right. It doesn't even matter if there was no other choice. What matters is that you were the one who made it. I remember their faces, not their names. I wish I could say I remembered their names, but I don't. I remember faces. I remember who smiled when I walked past. I remember who looked away. I remember one kid, couldn't have been older than 18, who was writing a letter the morning of the maneuver. He looked up at me and nodded, just a nod, nothing more. I wonder if he finished that letter. I wonder if it ever got sent. For years I didn't talk about this, not to my wife, not to my children, not to anyone. What would I say? That I killed 400 of my own men? That I did it to save people I'd never met? That I'd do it again? Because I would. If I were given the same situation, the same intelligence, the same time frame, I would make the same decision. And that's what I can't forgive myself for. Not that I made a mistake, but that I didn't. There's something people don't understand about war. They think it's about good and evil, about right and wrong, about heroes and villains. It isn't. War is when you are given two wrong choices and forced to pick one. And you carry that choice with you for the rest of your life. I am 93 years old. I have lived a long life. I have a family, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. I have been happy. I have been loved. But every night before I fall asleep, I see them. Young men looking at me, not angry, not accusing, just looking. They don't ask me why. They already knew why. They ask me if it was worth it, and I tell them the truth. I don't know. 25,000 people lived. 400 soldiers died. I made the right decision, and I am still guilty. He stops speaking. He does not look away from the camera. He does not wipe his eyes. He simply sits, silent, holding the weight of 70 years, fade to black.